Hello and well met. This is Layman with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Today or tonight, I'm going to be doing a tutorial slash setup for a show I want to do tomorrow. I'm going to conduct a NPC battle between a powerful werewolf and a powerful vampire. So it'll be Loup Garou versus the Nosferatu. So this will be kind of a way to show how Fantasy Grounds works. I'm also going to show some of the setup process in this part one. Part two will be the actual battle in the arena, and it is going to be judged and refereed by Van Helsing or Van Richten, however you want to look at that. He's going to be the referee, so some sort of space or arena where they're going to battle, so they have to kind of stay within that space. If they shape change or if they leave the arena, they basically lose the battle. So these are two epic, I wouldn't say evenly matched, but they will be close. They're both going to be CR 13 creatures. They both have legendary actions. They both have a ton of hit points. So it should last a little while depending on what they do. I'm going to strategically have them battle and fight and those sort of things. But in this particular episode, I'm going to actually be building the NPCs, the tokens, and getting the arena set up. And that's kind of a sort of thing you'll do if you're going to do a lot of homebrew or you want to add things to a map, whatever it might be. This might help you with that. Right now, I am using ChatGPT and Fantasy Grounds and other tools to create the content. So I just kind of give that out to you as a disclaimer. And also, I'm going to be creating some tokens for these guys, custom ones. So this should be pretty informative. And the show I'm going to do tomorrow will probably be a little bit earlier in the evening or the day. And that will just be like the battle essentially and kind of how to work that into the combat tracker. So I thought this would be kind of interesting and kind of try it out, see if there's any interest in it. If it sucks or you don't think it's worth it, just let me know in the comments after. I'll also list the resources that I used and also our links and such for the Fantasy Grounds Academy. And if you like what we do, you can support us by following us. You can donate to us. You can volunteer in the Fantasy Grounds Academy, whatever you want to do. So I have the DnD5e rule set opened up here. And I'm going to grab my pointer so you guys can see what I'm pointing at. Essentially, I'm using the NPC importer tool. I've done this on numerous videos. I used ChatGPT to help me create the stat blocks, but I could have just as easily just picked the stat block from one of the modules that I've loaded. So speaking of modules, if I come over to the library and I click on modules, I have some of the key modules that I'm going to use for this content. So these are just various tools that I might use during this. So I'm going to set up the Sirenscape audio as well. So we can use that tomorrow during the battle. I've got some supplementary stuff from the DM's Guild. I have Van Richten's guide and I have the Curse of Strahd adventure. And then I have all the core rulebooks. So the only reason I have all this stuff open is just for my setup. When I actually go to play or run the campaign or the game, I'm going to disable some of these, the stuff I don't need. So this is something I've been preaching for a while, and it is something that a lot of people do not, they either don't want to listen to it or they don't believe it's true, but it can get cumbersome and overloaded if you have way too much content loaded. So I can't reiterate that enough. It might work on your computer, but people that are connected to you, if you're the GM, might run into some issues. So generally speaking, I wouldn't have this much content open if I was running a game. But in this case, I'm prepping. I don't have anyone connected to the table. I'm kind of using everything locally. I don't have my game up on the cloud, so I'm not concerned about how much stuff I have open right now. So that's all the modules that I have loaded. And I'm basically building custom NPCs right now based off of my story narrative. So the first one here, up to bat here, is a Nosferatu. It's basically just a vampire reskinned. And then I added a little bit of backstory to him. And I'm going to make some tokens for these guys as well. So in this case, his stage name is going to be Nosferatu, but it's basically a vampire. He's originally Lord Victor Draven, a cunning and ambitious noble from the twilight city of Nocturnia. Known for his intellect and ruthlessness, Draven was a figure of intrigue and fear even before his transformation. His origins were he transformed into Nosferatu as a result of a dark pact with an ancient vampiric entity seeking eternal life and power beyond mortal comprehension. Embracing his new form, he became a master of the night. His life story over the centuries, Nosferatu manipulated the course of history from the shadows, shaping empires and playing puppeteer to the fate of nations. His insatiable thirst for power and knowledge only grew with each passing century. To this day, in the present, Nosferatu's ambition has now transcended mortal desires. Seeking to ascend to a higher plane of existence, he delves into forbidden magic and dark rituals. His path to ultimate power leads him to a direct conflict with Loup Garou, whose presence threatens to unravel his grand design. So this is going to be kind of the premise, the lead up to the battle. So what I've done here is I've got this information here from ChatGPT, or you can grab something similar from D&D Beyond or from a PDF or whatever your source is. To use this tool is only available in the DnD5e rule set. There are other rule sets that have their own way of importing NPC stat blocks, but I just wanted to throw that out there so you're not trying to do this with Pathfinder or something, because it's a little different and it doesn't have the same type of structure. So basically, this text here is critical to how this import tool works. So if you don't have the text formatted just right, this tool can be very annoying and it'll just piss you off. So the whole key of this tool is to have the formatting correctly. So everything on each line is critical. All the punctuation, all the formatting, all the different little bits and pieces here, these are required to be on there in order for this to work correctly. So a lot of the times when you're using generative AI, it's not quite sure what it is that you're asking. So you need to give it a template or some sort of example of the text format that you really want. And once you do that, it generally will give you the right outcome. But every now and then it'll still do what it wants. Typically, it will mess up the stat blocks. They won't be in the correct format. So for the sake of ChatGPT, usually I ask it to make this in a table format. So 2 rows, 6 columns. And that generally works for the arrangement, because a lot of times it'll put the stat right after the acronym for the ability scores, or it'll put it in some weird format that won't parse. The next thing it gets wrong quite a bit are the traits and the actions. So you should have a section labeled traits with no punctuation, and then all of your actions, they need to have a period after it. So in this case, like he has Misty Escape, that has a period after it. Regeneration has a period after it. What will happen in a custom AI thing is it'll leave traits out, or it'll put semicolons after that, and then for the shape changer ability, it'll put a hyphen or a semicolon or a colon or just a space. So that isn't what you want. It has to have this period after there, or it's not going to parse. The next is the actions. So it will do the same thing. It'll just put a hyphen or a space or a semicolon. That's not going to work. It needs to have a period. So multi-attack period, and then whatever it is after. It has unarmed strike period, and then it defines melee attack weapons. So all this formatting is very important if you're going to use this particular tool. Over here on the right, this is the notes. This is where you would link your artwork. This is where you'd put your pictures, or you want to link tables or minions or whatever onto this section, you can do so at this time. So I could essentially make some tokens, get them and put into Fantasy Grounds, and associate those now, as I do this. So I'll first import the stat block. But if you wanted to associate art at this time, you could by importing it into Fantasy Grounds and then linking it to this link or to this section here. Or you can do it after the fact. It doesn't really matter in this case, but just letting you know that you have options with this formatting over here on the right. So I made a header, and then these are in bold so you can read it. And when I import this, this should be nice and tidy and should be able to display properly. And I'll check it over and make sure that all these actions parsed correctly. So let's go and see what happens. So I'm going to click the import. So how I got to this is I went over to campaigns, went to NPCs. Up here on the group, I made my own group. So you use the drop-down menu, click on the pencil, that's edit, and then you click on the little plus button here, or you can right-click and add, and essentially it'll make a new entry, and then you can come and rename it. In this case, this is going to be Loup Garou versus Nosferatu is the name of the group. Once you do that, you get out of the edit mode, and then you just click on the header, and you have your own group. So that whenever you make your own group and you create content in here, it kind of separates it out from the stuff that's already there or from other work that you've done. So that's how you keep your campaign kind of organized. And I would use this as the work campaign. So in other words, I wouldn't necessarily run my games out of here. This is just where I would work and develop my campaign and my NPCs and all the other stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and click on import. And your stat block will pop up, and I'm going to look for errors before I move on. So what I'm looking for is that the stat block itself parsed correctly. So it looks like it did up here, and then you got the size, the type. There is no alignment because we can assign that. So I'm just going to say lawful evil, even though it's not as critical in the Fantasy Grounds or in the DnD5e rule set. Although Fantasy Grounds may parse that for protection, good and evil from the spell. So it is good to have at least something in there if that matters in your campaign for spells. Movement's there, damage threshold, we don't have to worry about that. And then all the saving throws, the languages. It just says the language it knew in life, so it's probably common. Challenge rating 13. It has a +5 proficiency bonus, and it's worth 10,000 experience. What do you know? So it has a shape changer, legendary resistance 3 times per day, misty escape, regeneration, spider climb, and it has vampire weaknesses, which is sunlight sensitivity and running water. So then it also has some actions. So it has multi-attacks in which it can bite, or it can use its unarmed strike, and then it also has a charm ability. And then there are some legendary actions where it gets 3 of these. Essentially, it can move up to its speed without getting opportunity attacks. It can make an extra unarmed strike, and I said one-armed, or it can make a bite attack. So it can kind of get an extra bonus attack, essentially. So this looks right. This looks like it parsed correctly. When it doesn't, all this stuff will be either jumbled up or it won't even be on here. You'll know right away. And by hovering over, if you see this little parsing thing, this like text that glows, that is kind of showing you that this is parsed correctly. So the damage and the attack rolls and the DC saving throws, that all look like it did correct. And then I'm going to click on the other tab, and this is the summary. This is where the text went. And then if you use the character wizard, you're going to get this nice, beautiful like table and the summary here. And this only happens if you use the import tool in Fantasy Grounds. You'll notice that older modules don't have this if they were built when Classic was around or before this feature was added, or even some content that's put out before this feature will not have this nice summary unless you go back in and redo it. So that's why this may look a little different from other stat blocks. So this is one of the 2 contestants here. So this is Nosferatu. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll just lock this up for now. And then I'm going to go ahead and close it. And what I'll do is I'll bookmark it down below at the bottom. And then I'm going to put this stat block where I want it to go so it's not in the way when I'm working. So I'll go ahead and close some stuff down, rearrange my desktop so it's not in the way. And that's one of the things you got to learn about Fantasy Grounds is if you open a new window, it's always going to be smack dab in the center. The theme that I'm using is the dark theme. I kind of wanted something a little bit more shadowy, less bright. That's kind of why I'm using this. But I'm also using this blood from the Curse of Strahd game where you can have like this blood splatter on here. I'm going to also change the dice, so we can do that during the show as setup. I'm going to change it to the blood dice. I thought that'd be appropriate for the show, so let's do that. So I'm going to open up the dice. And if you are a subscriber or you've purchased the extra dice that come with the packs, the dice packs, the latest one was the blood one, which was released around the time of the new updated vampire rule set, Vampire the Masquerade, but it's also available in other rule sets. I'm going to go ahead and change the body text, so I kind of want this to be red, kind of a reddish color. And what you can do with this is you can use this color picker to change the color, and once you've done that, you can go ahead and approve it, or you can use this dropper tool and hover around in your game somewhere and grab some red from somewhere else. Like maybe you want the red from this text. So you can use the little dropper tool to grab that text. So if I come over here and I hover over these letters or these text, this red text over here, you can get the actual color from that. So it really depends on what your needs are. So there's kind of that blood red color. I'm going to hit OK. And then for the text itself, I'm just going to have completely black. So I do that, and there we go. So this is the colors that I want. And then if I come down here at the bottom, there's some customized looks here where you can actually change the way these dice look. I think these look a little bit dim, so I might use just the regular filter. And then you can use this dice, kind of make it look more interesting. And then there's the liquid blood version where it's kind of like more like spray instead of the splashes. And then you have more of the same kind of, but it leaves kind of both. So I kind of like that one. And then there's the claw one, which would be kind of cool for like the vampire fighting with the werewolf with their claws. So you can do all kinds of cool stuff, but I'm just going to use this. I think I'm going to use the first one. Let's see, there's blood splatter, there's the magic, the blood splatter magic, and then blood impact. So there's that. So we could do that. So anyway, so this is just a kind of to add to the theme of your particular content if you want. So I'll go ahead and close that, and those are paid. So if you are looking for those, if you're new to Fantasy Grounds, you do have to purchase those separately. I believe the dice packs are like $5 each or something like that. I don't remember. It's been a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and add the other NPC to our battle here, and that's going to be the Loup Garou werewolf. So I'm going to import that from the text from the ChatGPT session that I had. So I'm going to open that up and bring that work over, and you'll be able to see the type of work I'm doing. So here I'm using Canva, and what I've done is generated some of these like a little flyer for the actual game. So if you want to make your own tokens and such, this works really good for that. So I'm going to render these, and then this thing I'm going to use for my thumbnail, social media, that kind of thing. And then the other thing you can do is make like your banner for YouTube or such if you're a streamer or somebody that does live streams. So that's the Canva work, and I'm going to take these tokens and actually put those into either I can do it like this and make my own tokens, or I can do the token stamp, which is a Roll Advantage token stamp website. So if I open up this and then go to token stamp, there's is your basic tool that you can use. You can drag over the images, resize them, you can put a border around them if you want, just however you want to do it. So I'm going to come back over here. So this was talking about the referee is going to be Van Helsing or Van Richten. And then these are some of the stories that come from the actual, for the NPCs. So I kind of made a narrative background for them. So here we've done the, I think we've done the vampire already, or maybe that's, yeah. So this is the vampire. So we're going to do the Loup Garou. So in this area, there is Loup Garou. So I'm going to copy and paste this background information and put this into Fantasy Grounds. So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to click on the import tool under NPC. So it's at the bottom, this little hamburger menu. and you get a blank session here. So now what I'm going to do is on the right hand side, I'm going to paste the story element, and then I'm going to get rid of some of this text because I don't want the whole thing. And then I'm going to right click and go to this clean up text, so it kind of gets rid of this extra spaces. And then I'm going to highlight the text and use Control 2. You can go 1 through 6 if you want, and that's going to make this header. And then I'm just going to hit highlight the text and hit Control B as in Bob, and that will help highlight the sections here so that when we go to read it as a GM or as a developer, you can see what you're doing. And then on the left here, I'm going to copy and paste the actual stat block. So I'm going to go back into ChatGPT, go look for the stat block. It's up here further. You can see I've been kind of working in this, checking out all the different varieties of art that I'm generating. I was looking to make a mugshot, and here's some cool art that came up with, which I thought would be really fun to use. So I might download that later and use this for my thumbnail for YouTube. And there's another cool one. This one turned out pretty good. The only thing I can say that didn't turn out good was that the hands are still kind of goofy. But other than that, on a rainy day and a dark night, who cares? I do like how this turned out, this little face-to-face thing, but I didn't use it. But I do have it if I wanted to use it for like a thumbnail or like a little promo picture. So that was part of this work, was to come up with a cool image that would embody the fight between these two. And then this is like the epic showdown of Dracula versus the werewolf. So this is kind of something that I was doing, kind of have a theme. So you can kind of show the tools, but also show the process. So now I'm going to look for the Loup Garou. I believe it's up here further. So this is the vampire. Yeah, so here's the Loup Garou. So I'm going to take this text here, copy and paste it. So this is what was generated in the actual ChatGPT. I did give it an example so that it can make this format correctly. But if it's like this and it's set up correctly and has the right punctuation, as I was saying earlier, this will help with that. So I'm going to go back into Fantasy Grounds, and I'm going to import that stat block. So on the left-hand side of this window, the import window, I'm going to hit Control V for paste, and you can see it has all these spaces in there. So if you want a preview of what it's going to look like, you can right-click, clean up the text. So that will put all this stuff in a certain order. And then over here in parentheses, I'm going to just put vampire, or this is not vampire, it's a werewolf. So this is essentially what that is. It's a Loup Garou, which comes out of the Van Richten's guide, and it's a lot more equivalent to a vampire. A regular werewolf's only a CR3, so this is actually a CR13 creature, which is a lot more equivalent and the same power level essentially as the vampire. So I'm going to go ahead and take that, and once you have all this stuff and you want to take a look at these, so here's the Blood Frenzy, Legendary Resistance, Regeneration, there's some actions, a bite, claws. It has a long sword. If it's in humanoid form, it can use one. I don't think I'm going to have weapons. I think they're just going to use their claws and their teeth. But it is an option if I need to. They both could actually use a sword if I wanted to. Yep, so it has a legendary action, so it has a swipe, mauling, pounce, and a bite. So it has 3 legendary actions as well. So I'm going to go ahead and click on import. And what I'm going to get here is another stat block. So this is the Loup Garou. This is the actual werewolf. And to me, it looks like it messed up here. So this didn't turn out quite right because of the way. Yeah, so this is multi-attack, but then it has all these other things in here. So this is the kind of thing you want to look out for. So what I'm going to do is close this. I'm going to go back to, I'm going to right click and delete and start over. I'm going to take a look at my text again and see where the problem is. So bonus action. So probably it has something to do with this. I don't think that this needs to be in there. This bonus actions, that might have thrown it off. And this thing here where it says dire wolf hybrid form only, I don't think that this is necessary. So what I'll do is edit that out. So I'm going to go ahead and repaste that, and I'm going to get rid of some of these different things. I don't think it's necessary. This could be legendary actions, or this could even be like, something else. I don't think bonus actions is required, but we'll see. So I'll go ahead and go back to Fantasy Grounds, and I'm going to go back to the import tool. I shouldn't have closed it, but oh well. So I'll hit this for Control V, and I'm going to get rid of this bonus actions. I don't think it needs that. I don't think so. And I think shape change should actually be a trait and not an action. So I'm going to do copy, and then I'm going to do paste. And then this legendary resistance, I think that should be down here under the legendary actions, because it doesn't make sense to have them up there. So there are some things in here that I need to clean up in case, because this is the kind of thing that throws off the parsing. So I want to get rid of that one up here. And then shape change is in the right place, but I want to get rid of it down here because I don't think that's an action. That's more like a trait. And this multi-attack looks right, but this bite here that says dire wolf, with the parentheses and all that, I think that's throwing it off. So I'm just going to make it say bite. I don't need all that extra stuff in there. You can put that as a note somewhere else after it, but you don't want to put that in the description. I think it throws off the parsing. So just going to have a regular period in there and not a bunch of extra text, and that should clean this up. So long sword, same thing. I think that's throwing off the parsing. And actually, I don't even want the longsword, to be honest, because we're going to use claws and teeth in this battle. So that should be eliminated. Okay, so I'm going to right-click, go to clean up text. And that should help. And then I got to reformat the background. I regret closing that, but oh well. You live and learn. So I'll go back to the Loup Garou backstory that I made for it. So it kind of gives it a little bit more than just a basic stat block, and you're going to get a lot more out of it having that backstory. In case you need to run it, you're going to have something there, and that's going to make it a lot more interesting and fun to run. So here's his narrative background right here. So copy that. No big deal. And go back into Fantasy Grounds. Paste it over here on the top right. And like I said, I'm going to get rid of the text that I don't want. And then I'm going to do a little bit of formatting. So right click, cleans up that text. Highlight, I'm going to hit Control 2 to make that red header. And then highlight the text, Control B to make this, these are shortcuts for text editing. I do recommend you learn those. It will make your job a lot quicker and easier if you're going to do homebrew content. And this will help clean it up. So there we go. So let's see if that helped. So the first time I did this, it wasn't correct because it had things in different places. It had weird punctuation. So anytime you have that, it'll throw that parsing off. So I'm going to go ahead and hit import, and let's see what it does now. Yeah, so shape change, generation, blood fury. Yep, multi-attack, bite, claws. So before it was all crammed into a trait, and that's because of the way the text was formatted. Here's all the legendary resistance, the swipe, mauling, pounce, and the extra bite. So there you go. That is essentially the stat block. And then if I come over here to the other tab, there we go. So this is the way that this thing came out. It turned out really nice. So once you're done doing all your stat blocks, now you can assign your artwork, your tables, whatever stuff you want linked on here. So what I'm going to do is go back to my browser and go back to this Roll Advantage token stamp. And I'm going to go to my downloads folder because that's where I downloaded the content to be changed into token. So I'm going to go to my downloads folder, pull that up, and take the content from there and convert it so that I can use it in Fantasy Grounds. So, all right, so I have a folder here that has the artwork in it, and then I'm going to right click and extract all, and that should give me the tokens. And then this artwork, I'm going to right click, extract all too. So this is just the artwork, the posters and all that stuff. So first things first is I'm going to do the tokens. So this is kind of how they turned out. So they look really good. There's transparency there. I don't have to worry about that. Sometimes you do want a background for contrast, but in this case, I just want their faces. And then I'm going to minimize this and then open up. There's the page for token stamp. So I'm going to drag and drop this over here. And as you can see, there's a preview image over here. So I'm going to use these extremities to expand and contract. And then I don't want to do it too much because I'm going to put a token ring around it so it's more visible. So I'm just going to use this kind of this reddish, kind of orange color, which is kind of themed for the vampire anyways. And then close that. And I'm going to take and kind of shrink this a little bit and put it in context with this particular area. And in the background, I'll probably make it black, but you could do something like red to kind of make it stand out, but I think that's a little too much. So I think just a black background is definitely a little bit better. So there we go. There's that. And then I'm going to hit download, and that'll go into my downloads folder. And now I'm going to do the same thing for the Loup Garou, but I'm going to use a silver, and then I'm going to drag his image, the werewolf, and replace the vampire. So go ahead and do the same thing, drag and drop. There we go. Make this and actually put this in here like a preview. Shrink it just a tiny bit more, and there we go. So there's the actual werewolf token I'm going to use on the map, or for the NPC. So I'm going to go ahead and download that. So these download as PNG files. They're 256 by 256, which is a decent size for a token. They recommend doing 512 by 512 if you do WebP format. And the only reason you use WebP is to cut down your file sizes. But if you're only going to have 2 of these, it's not going to matter. It's when you have hundreds and thousands of these is when it adds up. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and put these into Fantasy Grounds. So I'm going to open up my downloads folder and take a look to see where those tokens ended up. So I have an art folder already kind of set aside for Fantasy Grounds, and I'm going to put that into Fantasy Grounds so that it's available for my games. I'm waiting for it to refresh. There we go. So here's the 2 tokens. So I'm going to drag and drop those into my art folder. And then I'm going to go to the art folder, and here you have these tokens, and then you have these couple pictures here that I set up. So what I want to do with this is go ahead and I don't need this particular picture, so I'll go ahead and delete that. But if you've got a ton of images, you want to convert those over to WebP. In this case, I don't really need to, but I'm going to rename these because that's important. So I'm going to say, so this is vampire versus werewolf. Okay, it's kind of a generic picture. And in front, I'm going to say art _ vampire versus werewolf. And the reason I do that is when you're in Fantasy Grounds, you want to be able to know what this is. And it's better to label it instead of leaving it as some random number or some weird description. So in this one, the art is kind of the same thing, but this is Loup Garou versus Nosferatu. Same difference. So Loup Garou versus Nosferatu. And this is just an art piece that I might use in Fantasy Grounds. kind of like presentation, you know, to show your players, that sort of thing. And then these guys here, I'm just going to name it TKN as in token, and then underscore Nosferatu. And the reason I do that is so that it organizes by type, and then it organizes alphanumerically. And then I will do TKN underscore Loup Garou. And that way, when you bring it into Fantasy Grounds, you have a separation. And then I might even put like underscore 01, because you might have different variations of that type of creature. And then if you don't have a number designator, it may make that a little bit more confusing too. But these are both, or if you have a catalog, you might say that the vampire is number 1 and this one's number 2. It just depends. So in this case, these are going to be unique. I don't have to worry about it. So the next step is, where do these go? So it really depends on what you're doing. So if I take this content here and I just throw it into Fantasy Grounds, it'll be available in there, but it may not be in the proper directory. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, or I can take this whole folder if I wanted to, but I'm just going to take the individual images since I only have a couple. And I'm going to copy those and then bring up Fantasy Grounds. And then over here on the right under Assets, I'm going to start adding this artwork in here. So under Assets, this is where you store your images, your tokens, and your maps. When you first open this, it's under All, which accounts for everything. In this case, I want to go to Images, and I'm going to click the Folder button. And that's going to take you to the default directory for your campaign that you're in. So here I'm going to click on, or just hit Control V, and there's the artwork. And then I'm going to change this to large icons. Now what I'm going to do is separate the stuff out. So I'll have a folder here called Art, and then I'll put those in there because I want them to be separated by what they are. And when I get maps, I'll put those in a map folder. Now these are tokens, so they don't really belong in this images folder per se, but I'm going to go ahead and hit copy, or cut in this case. And then I want to come over to the tokens section up here in Assets, and I'm going to hit refresh for right now because that's going to pull in the changes that I've made. And now what I'm going to do is make sure I'm on tokens, click on folder, and it's going to be a subfolder that's within your campaign. So I'm going to hit Control V for paste, and whenever you add, rename, delete things, those sort of things in Fantasy Grounds, you want to hit this refresh. So the refresh will go through and capture the changes. So now those tokens are in the assets under tokens for this particular campaign. If you want these to exist in all of your games and not just this campaign, you click on all over here, and on this top corner here is a data folder. And in the data folder, maybe I want these to exist outside of my campaign as well. So I have a folder already set up for all my custom tokens. So these are all things that I've made over the months. So I'm going to go ahead and click on folder. And then if you go here, this is the top level of Fantasy Grounds. This is the main directories. So if you go into your tokens, and then I have a folder here called custom. And this is where I would, and I have a horror section here. So I'll just paste those in here since it's kind of themed for that. And did I copy them or not? Doesn't look like it. So I want to go here, copy these, and then go back to the folder that I was trying to do in the first place, which was the master folder, and put those in there. So this way, when you use these in other campaigns, they're easier to get to. If you don't put them in the master one, when you go to bring that up, it'll go to that first, and then you have to dig through your and try to remember which campaign it was. So if you want it to be available outside of your campaign, you got to put it in the master folder. If you want it only for this campaign, you plan on making an adventure and you're going to export it and such, then you put them in here. But in this case, for the separation part of it, now I want to refresh, make sure that I got that. And, you know, it captures all the changes that I've done. Now when I go to tokens, I have campaign tokens. When I go to images, I have campaign images in a subfolder. So now instead of using this blood drop, maybe I'll use this picture as my background decal, or I can add the image to the campaign. So in this case, maybe I'll do this as my background decal, something like that. Normally I probably would have edited this and had it kind of blend in with the background more, but just kind of show you that you can, it's pretty flexible. And then if I want to add these to the actual campaign and use them in my game, I can either drag those over, or I can import from the campaign itself, but I want to make a new group first. So I'm going to click on edit and click this plus button, which will add the category. And then in this section right here, I'm going to put Loup Garou versus Nosferatu, because that's going to be the name, I guess, of this campaign. So Nosferatu. So I got to pronounce that, and that's not an S on the end of Garou. Go ahead and click the edit button again, and now I want to select the actual section that I've made, and I can either drag and drop these over here, or you can use this import button, or you can import from down here on the bottom frame. Then I go ahead and just drag these over. That's going to make campaign images that'll be a part of the game here. So now when I play, I'll be able to share these with the players and not just have a background decal. And if I want to get rid of a decal in Fantasy Grounds, I don't want anything on there, period, or any sort of distractions, you can come into the options, click on background decal, and they're bound on the bottom left, there's a clear. So you can actually clear that out. So that way you don't have to have a decal, but I just wanted to show that flexibility. And here's the blood splatter that comes with the Curse of Strahd. So I'm going to put that back the way I had it. And I'm going to go ahead and start continuing with my setup. So I have already created the NPCs. I've made the tokens. I've imported my art. Now it's when you start doing this, you're going to have an association. So what you want to do is start associating your art with all of your work. So you do all your artwork first if you can. You do all of your text and your writing and your linking and all that stuff after that with your art. So I'm going to bring up my NPCs again. And right now, when you first create these, they're going to just be a letter token. You know, it's just plain, like this one's an L, and the other one was a capital V, I believe, which is the first letter. And then I wanted to put Werewolf here for part of his title. So Werewolf. That way I remember who's who. I mean, pretty sure I can remember, but when you are creating content for other people, you want to make sure you label this stuff well. And then I'm going to bring this up, and with the artwork that I created, I'm going to associate the art with these. So you have to have this unlocked. And then the campaign tokens that I had were in the assets under tokens up here on the top. And then I'm going to open up the campaign and drag and drop these over to replace the letter token. So this one's for the vampire, so that'll be on here. So that's going to be now a permanent token. And I'll go ahead and lock it. And then do the same thing for the werewolf. So generally speaking, I will stretch these out so that I can see what's going on. And then I'm going to take this token, drag and drop it, and there we go. So now we have custom tokens. So we want to test our stat blocks when we make these. So again, I'm going to open up my NPCs. Loup Garou is there. And what you'll notice is when you have these stacked up in a certain spot, they're always going to be in that spot if you leave them there. So there's the vampire. Here's the Loup Garou. And I want to put that here. And then I'm going to stretch out the combat tracker a little bit and the chat window. So I want to get those up, bring up the combat tracker. And this is part of your setup anyway. So something you want to get in the habit of doing. So once they're on there, now I'm going to take the NPCs and I can drag and drop them on individually, or to make it easier on myself, in the long run, I can just make this an encounter. So what I'll do is I will take and go to encounters. Again, I'm going to drop down, make my own group by hitting this edit button, and then the green add category, or in this case, it's gray. And I'm going to put my Van Richten or Van Helsing guy in here, and I'll do that later, but he's going to be more or less just a referee and a way to test things out. So Loup Garou versus Nosferatu. Okay, so now that I have this named and I have my own group, now I'll select it. Now what I'm going to do is build a basic encounter with both the NPCs in here. So we're going to call this, we'll just call this combatants, because I kind of want to have it set. So when I get ready to play, I'll know what it is, and I'll just say vampire versus werewolf or something like that. So I remember what it is. And then I'm going to take the NPC stat block and drag and drop it into this area. So when I need it, it's going to be right there. And when I go to place this on a map, I can pin this here, and it'll be so much easier to do than trying to individually drag those into this combat tracker, because now all I have to do is hit the down arrow instead of dragging individual NPCs into here. Nothing wrong with that occasionally, but if you want to be organized, it's so much easier to have it in this particular encounter. And then I'm going to take the encounter and drag and drop it down to the bottom here so that I have an easier access to that. And when I need it, it's going to pop up exactly where I need it. So let's go ahead and put this where I want it to go. So maybe down here somewhere, because I know I'm going to have a map. So I want to make sure that's not in the way of a map. And I don't need it this long. And at this point, you can tell it what faction you want it to be. So normally it would just faction from the alignment, but I want to make sure that it's one of them at least is hostile, maybe one's neutral. So the vampire, I'll make him hostile, and then the werewolf, I'll make him neutral. And then when I'm done, I can go ahead and link this to a map, or I can hit this down arrow and it will add them to the combat tracker, and then I can add them to the map after the fact. So that's my next step, is just kind of to check the stat block. So they both have regeneration, so that automatically gets parsed into the NPC stat block if it's created correctly. And if you go to the offense here, which is the sword, you can expand and look at all of their actions and such here. If you see this, that's a good sign. If you have a spellcaster, the spells will be in there. So this looks pretty good. So that's what you want to see. And then, of course, you want to see the tokens if you can. And then you're also going to want to see, this expanded view of what they look like. And out. So the next step will be to take a look at the map. So I'm going to temporarily remove these guys off of the combat tracker. And the only reason I'm doing this is to kind of show you some things in Fantasy Ground. So if I want to get rid of both of these, I just come down to menu, go to delete from tracker, and you can do all non-friendly or just the foes. So if I click just the foes, it's going to get rid of the vampire, but not necessarily the werewolf. But if I click on all non-friendly, it's going to get rid of both of them. So that's basically a quick way to clear out NPCs. You want to do players, you have to individually delete them or change their faction in the combat tracker, and then use that filter below. So that's a quick way to remove them if you need to. Generally speaking, you don't want to take those off of your combat tracker during the middle of the game if you can help it, because you have different things in there like your status, your effects, your initiative order. You want to try to keep that intact as best you can. All right, so next is a map. So I need to figure out what map I want to use for this particular encounter. So I'm going to do a little soul searching here. I'm going to go through my huge, whopping asset list, which is something that I have been hammering on people about having 50 gazillion maps and 50 gazillion tokens. Well, I am the worst for that. I'm going to be the first to admit That's why I can kind of say that with authority, because even though I have a really good computer, it's like brand new. I got 64 megs of RAM. I got a decent GeForce gaming video card that's not old. You know, I got a new system. I got an Intel i7. I don't know. Anyway, so that doesn't matter after a while, because what happens is when you got all that stuff and you're using Fantasy Grounds, it has to go through that. And after a while, it takes it a while to index all that stuff. So even with the biggest, baddest computer around, eventually it catches up to you. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my assets. And I'm going to go back to the home. And what I want to do is go to images, and then I'm going to do a search. So I want to do the Uber Shrike, which is an arena. So the Uber Shrike arena was created by this was made by Chris McDermott, Game Tile Warehouse, and I know about this Uber Shrike because I was around when he created it. So it doesn't really have any line of sight on it, but during the battle, I'm not going to need a ton of it. I might put a few things on there, but in this case, probably not a big deal. I could use a forest map where they're fighting in the forest, but I kind of want to contain the battle to a certain area. So I think I'm going to use this particular arena and then kind of embellish it with different decorations and that sort of thing. So this is an image that is in my Fantasy Grounds directories under images. It's not associated with anything particular. So what I want to do is bring up my campaign thing again under campaigns under images, and I'm going to create an image record, which is going to send it over here into the images. So I'm going to create the record, and now I can use this as a map in my particular game. And the next thing I do is size the map where I can see it. And then I'm going to right click, and you can go to view, and you can go to zoom to fit, or you can use this little drop down up here and do the same thing and then use the extents thing. It says zoom to fit there. So there's two ways you can recenter the map. And now what I'm going to do is I might set up a little bit of line of sight, like probably just put some glass around here, so that the players or whoever would be using this can't move past this wall. And that would be about it for this. This doesn't need a lot. And then, of course, the grid is the first thing. So I'm going to go ahead and put a grid on it. So I'm going to grab the grid tool over here on the right. I know that these maps are 50 by 50 roughly for dimension. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the visibility. And I could be wrong. So let me see. This looks like it's off. I don't know why, but I'll try to corner it up and see what's going on, because it might be a bigger size. Let me try 70, or it could be a little smaller. It's been a while since I've used these. Yeah, that didn't make any difference. So I must have resized this at some point, which is kind of a no-no, because what'll happen is you lose the squareness and it becomes more of a kind of a rectangle instead of a square. And I can already tell that it doesn't look right because of the way that the edges look here. So you see how it has this edging here? I don't think the original map had that. So I must have altered it at some point, which is kind of a, it's not horrible, but it's not the right thing. But anyways, it doesn't already have a grid baked into it, which I'm kind of glad, because this gives you more flexibility. So what I'm going to do is, just to line it up a little bit better, I'm going to take the layers tool, select the map layer, and just kind of butt it up here in the corner, and that fixed it, kind of. So it's squared up now, which is fine, not a big deal. But just to let you know that maps can be annoying if you import them and they already have a grid on it, and if you've stretched it or done anything to it, or you get it randomly off a website, it's probably already stretched and messed up. So you will have a hard time lining up the lines if you don't know the scale and that sort of thing. Now I'm going to tint these lines here because I want them to show up a little bit more. So oops, I didn't mean to do that. So I wanted to actually go to the grid tool, use the tinting, and I'm going to change the grid to like kind of this blood red color. So I can use this pointer here and go off the blood off of this blood drop, or I can go off the dice or something like that. So I think I'm going to use the this kind of blood red color in here, just kind of pick my own color. So let me get out of that. Change to kind of a darker red, and then kind of fade it just a little so it's not too bright. And there we go. So now we have our grid. It's kind of themed for the map. And then we have our arena. And it don't really need a lot here. So maybe I will put some glass around here, something like that. So if you were going to run this as like a player versus player, just so they don't run through the stands here, you can take like you put some glass around here to make it to where they're not going to be moving through this. So what I'll do is I will go to the line of sight tool, and let's change the time of day. So I want it to be dim. So let's change the lighting first. So I'm going to go to, this is the time of day, and the ambient. You don't really have to do this since it's not really an adventure, but it is outdoors, so I do want to have some ambient light. So what we're going to do is go to ambient lighting and then use the drop down to go to moonlight. And you won't see this yet until I enable the line of sight or the lighting. So if I go over here in the lighting, it gets a little dimmer. And then if I go to this, it's going to be completely black or really dim for this is the player view. And then for that encounter that I made earlier, I would link this to the map. So let me turn off the lighting thing for right now. So I'll link this to the map so that it's ready to go for my encounter. So I'm going to stick this pin up here in the stands where the big bosses are. It's like one of those Roman arenas. And then I'm going to place these particular combatants strategically on the map ahead of time. So this Loup Garou guy, he's going to start down here. And then the vampire is going to start exactly opposite on the other side. So that's where these guys are going to be when I start the encounter. So if I close this, they'll disappear temporarily because you don't want your players to see that before they even get on the table. But you can set these now to go onto the combat tracker. So if I close this, when it's time to play, I can bring up the encounter, click this down arrow. The NPCs are already on the combat tracker and they're ready to go on the map. So when it's time, I can unveil them as needed. So when I first get on the table, the map will be here, and then I can just use that tool to bring those up. So that's a quick way to kind of set up an encounter ahead of time, and they're already placed. So if you had players that are going to be in here, that would be helpful for that. Now the next thing I'm going to do is turn back on this line of sight stuff. And when I click on these particular tokens, they both have dark vision. So this coloring stuff kind of fades away because they have kind of like a black and white dark vision. So even with this darkness on, they can still see. So that's why I kind of have this dim. So it's going to be like at sunset or something like that, or before the sun comes up, some kind of battle like that. Then the other thing I'm going to do is put the glass on there like I was saying earlier. So this is the player view. And when I'm working with maps, I turn that stuff off so I don't get confused. I just want to leave it blank so I'm not getting weirded out by the lighting and stuff. And I'm going to come over to the wall tool. And in this case, I'm going to use glass so they can still see all this. You just can't move through it. So I'm going to put a glass window around this whole thing just as a barrier. So I'm going to go ahead and go to window, and it doesn't do anything but block movement in this case. So I'm just going to click on here and just go to the line tool and just kind of come around here and just click on this periphery and go around, and then I'm going to join it on the back end here. So it's not going to be a glass window inside the arena. It's going to be on the outer edge because I want that center part open. So it's going to be kind of like a round window that surrounds the whole place. So what I'm going to do is do something like this and go around the whole thing. And I think I already messed up because I don't want that. I kind of want it to be like this. So I'll do it like this. So I'm going to use this. This is kind of like my scapegoat here. And this will be my glass window that surrounds the entire arena. Because this is kind of just for the sake of blocking movement. So the tokens or the players can't move beyond the walls. And that's all I'm trying to do here. So that, and then this, and then join it here. So what you'll find in Fantasy Grounds is if you try to click on something like that, you might miss it, but in this case I got it. So it's kind of hard to see, so it's better just to draw past. And if I zoom in really wide here, you can see that I didn't connect those. So that can be a problem with walls and such. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to temporarily turn off the, oops, I didn't mean to do that. What the hell did I do? Did I click on something wrong? No. Okay, so what I'm going to do is make sure I'm on the selection tool. That way I'm not redrawing. And then I'm going to move this. I wanted to get off the zoom. Oh, here's a snap, magnetic snap. So I'm going to turn that off temporarily so I can move this over. So it's not going to give me as much grief. And I'm going to take this and join those up. And that way it doesn't annoy you and you're able to do so without a bunch of hoopla here. All right, so there's that. And then this part, I'm going to just put another window in here. Not a big deal. So, or I might even put like a terrain tool, something like that. But you can make your adjustments if you need to at this point with any of your points. So if you don't like, where the lines ended up, you can kind of mess with that. And then I'm going to take this and kind of move it a little so you can kind of get everything dialed in after you put all your lines in. That makes it a little easier. Now what I'm going to do is create another window right here in this square. So in this case, I'll just go back to the drawing tool. I'm going to turn back on the point snap here. I'm just going to come out here and go to this part. Come down here. There we go. So now we got a window here and then a big window around the whole place. So that's not going to affect vision at all. It's going to just affect movement. So if the players want to move outside of this, they're going to have to talk to you about it. They might be able to fly or something like that. And in that case, you can just open the window, essentially. But for right now, this blocks movement, which is what you want in this case. And then I'm going to go back to the pointer tool, make any adjustments if I need to. There we go. So this is going to be ready for tomorrow. So when I do the combat, I'm going to do everything here on the map and on the actual combat tracker. And we'll go through that tomorrow when I do the video. But this is all the setup. So we did the NPCs, encounters, tokens, we set up the map. This is a lot of the things that you're going to have to learn how to do if you do a lot of homebrew. A lot of this is already set up if you're going to use the modules that are already created. You don't have to do all this usually. But if you want to do a lot of custom stuff, this kind of thing you'll have to mess with. What I might do is create a stat block later for this centerpiece because this rotates. And maybe I can even find some sort of animation that'll kind of simulate that movement. But essentially, I want this blade to move around. And if they get pushed into here, it can cause a lot of damage. It's not even moving that fast. It's probably only moving like 10 miles an hour or something like that. But these are big, rusty iron blades. So they're probably not very good for our NPCs, but that might just be a hazard to keep them from camping out in the center. And then on the edges where the fans are, I can make another hazard where they might drop down heavy items like rocks and whatnot, and that may also deter it won't hurt these guys, but it will maybe deter them from camping out on the wall. So there's different things you can do to kind of make this interesting. But that's all I'm going to do for today, and I want to make sure that I bookmark the map so that I can find it when I come back in. I'm not going to be looking for it. And again, I already put the encounter in here so that it's going to be ready to go. And then whenever you're done with your map, you can size it to where you want it to fit. And then I'm going to go back to the play mode and turn on the line of sight. And this is what it looks like for the NPCs and the players. So this is going to be the battlefield. So if you're going to be here tomorrow, I'm going to come on a little earlier, and I'm going to record it as I'm doing now, and you'll be able to check out how the battle goes. But I'm going to be conducting the battle in the combat tracker and on the map, do the movements, do some of their abilities, check out, and just kind of make them fight. And this is a good practice. So if you want to learn how to use Fantasy Grounds, the combat tracker, that sort of thing, instead of running a game or trying to figure that out without any help, you can use the combat tracker and just kind of drag effects and things back and forth between the two to simulate the battle. So tomorrow we'll do the initiative rolls and all that stuff. So take care, everyone. Have a good weekend, and I'll probably see you tomorrow.